Hi everyone, we're continuing our series of beginner chess videos here on My Chess Notebook. And in this video, we're going to show you how to use the most powerful piece on the board, your queen, to checkmate your opponent. So take a look at the position. It's white to move, and he can checkmate black right now in one move. Now notice the white king is ideally placed. He's as close to the black king as he can get. Can't get any closer because the kings are not allowed to be next to each other. They would be checking each other if they were. So that's as close as we can get. And that white king is controlling these three important squares. I like to call that a little mini wall. And the black king is trapped behind that mini wall right in the center of it. So because of that, the white king can checkmate, or rather the white queen can checkmate by moving to h8. And that checks along this back rank, controlling all of those squares, and the black king cannot move forward. The white king controls all of those squares, so that's a checkmate. Likewise, queen to g8 is also a checkmate. Now there's a third checkmate in the position, and the white queen can deliver it by getting really close to the black king right there. I like to call that a close checkmate. So the king is supporting the queen, so the queen cannot be captured, and the queen is obviously controlling all of the escape squares. So the black king has nowhere to run. That's checkmate. Let's look at another position. Okay, here the white king is far away. So in order to deliver a checkmate, the king has to get closer to the black king. You have to approach that black king. The queen can't do it alone. But the queen is doing an excellent job from this b2 square because that queen is building a nice long wall along this file. That means the black king is trapped on the left edge of the board and can never leave the edge of the board. That's what you want. When you're trying to checkmate the king, you want to trap it on one of the four edges of the board. So all this king can do is pace back and forth on the left edge between these five squares. And while he's doing that, while he's wasting his time walking back and forth, the white king will approach. So let's see how it's done. So we'll move here, get closer to the king. Let's say he moves down, and we'll go right at him. Let's say he moves up. We want to go right as close as we can right there. And now there are two options for the black king. If he moves up, then we can get a close mate right on the b7 square. That's a checkmate. Or if he moves down, then we can slide up to the b5 square, and that's a checkmate as well. So that was a pretty easy checkmate because the king was already trapped on an edge of the board. So let's have a look at this position where the black king is not yet trapped on an edge of the board because the black king can get out of the corner and go to that square, for example. Well, your first priority is to trap him on an edge. And you can either trap him on the top edge or the left edge. It's your choice. For example, a good move here is to bring the queen to e7 and build a wall along the 7th rank, and that traps the black king on the top edge, and all it can do is move back and forth between these squares. So let's see what happens. So the black king moves over, and the white king gets closer. Maybe it moves to the right again, and the white king gets closer. Now it has to move to the left. It can't go right because the queen has that square covered, so it goes over here. And then we get our close checkmate right there on the b7 square. Let me back up to the beginning. So we just showed what happens if white moves here and traps the black king on the top edge of the board. What if the white king went here and built a wall and trapped that black king on the top edge of the board? Is that a good move? No, it is not a good move because it doesn't give the black king anywhere to move to. Okay, the black king has no legal moves. It can't move there, there, or there. But it's not in check. So this is an example of a stalemate, and the game is a draw. So you have to be careful not to trap the king in the corner like that. You have to give him a little breathing room. By the way, another way to win this game here is to put the queen on this B file and draw a wall there, and then the black king is trapped on the left edge of the board. And then the white king can approach, and eventually you'll get your close checkmate like that. Okay, now let's take a look at a much harder position right here. So the black king is in the center of the board. We cannot checkmate the king in the center of the board. We have to drive him to one of the four edges of the board to do this. So what I'm going to do first is move the queen up to c4, and that builds a nice wall on this fourth rank, and that keeps the black king above that wall. So the black king is now trapped on the top half of the board. And what my strategy is going to be is to drive that king all the way up to the top edge, all the way to the top edge. Anytime that black king steps backwards, like if he stepped backwards right now, then I want to bring the queen forward one more rank up the board. And I want to draw a wall along that rank now and trap the black king in the top 3 ranks of the board. How do I do that? Well, I move the queen here. Don't move it close to the king because it'll get taken. So you move it over here diagonally, and now you've got that 3rd rank covered. And again, anytime this king steps back towards the top of the board, just grab another rank and draw the wall higher up the board. And if he goes back again, grab another rank, draw a wall even higher. And once you get him trapped to the edge of the board, that's the time for the white king to come marching in and help checkmate. Now usually it's not quite that easy, because once we move our queen here to c4, it's likely the black king is not just going to voluntarily walk towards the top edge of the board here. Instead, the black king is going to try to stay centralized, try to stay in the center of the board. So let's say the king moves over here. Okay, so he didn't go up. Well, what I'm going to do in that case is start moving my king forward like that. And now let's say the king moves back towards the center of the board. Well, let's bring our king forward again, like that. And now let's say the king steps to the right again. Well, now I am going to slide the queen along this rank. Remember, building a wall on this 4th rank. I'm going to slide along that wall right there, right in front of that king, and call check. And the reason I do that is because now the black king is forced back diagonally to one of those 2 squares. So I'm forcing the black king up the board towards the top edge. Let's say he moves right there because he wants to stay centralized. Well, I have a wall built here, but I just forced the king up. So let's build a wall right there instead. How do I do that? Well, I move my queen right there and I've got that wall. So now the king is trapped to the top 3 ranks of the board. Okay, and let's say he moves over here. Now I'm going to move my king closer like that. You always want your king to go towards the black king, as close to him as you can get. And let's say he steps back here toward the center of the board. Well, again, I have a wall on this rank already. I want to push the king back up. So I'm going to come right here in front of the king like this, again, forcing the king back diagonally to one of those 2 squares. Let's say he moves to this one. Well, I forced him up towards the top, so I'm ready to take this wall and bring it up to that 6th rank right there. So I'm going to bring the queen right there. And now I've built a wall here, and the king is trapped on the top 2 ranks. Let's say he moves over here. He doesn't want to voluntarily go to the top edge of the board. Well, it's time to bring my king closer like that. And let's say he comes back to the center like this. And now I want to do the same thing I've been doing. I want to bring the queen right here, called check, right in front of the king, and that forces him back to one of those squares on the top edge of the board like we wanted. Now, a really good move for black here, who's about to get checkmated, so it doesn't much matter. But anyway, a good move for black here is to move over here rather than over here. And let me explain why. If you move here, you give white a chance to go wrong. What should white do here? Well, some players make this mistake. some players get closer with their king, like this. That's a mistake. Do you see why? Yeah, because the black king now has no squares to go to. Notice the white queen has all these squares covered here, and the white king has these squares covered. So the black king can't move, but it's not in check, so that's a stalemate. So here's a tip. Once you force the king to an edge of the board, immediately grab the rank with the queen to build the wall and keep him on that edge of the board. Don't bring the king up until you've grabbed that rank next to the top rank, that 7th rank here. Now it's easy. Now the black king can only pace back and forth between these squares, like he can go here, and then we bring the king closer. Maybe he goes back here, and we get a close checkmate. And that's it. Okay, let's take a look at a position with some pawns in it. So that's how you usually get a king and queen versus king, is very often you play a long game and in the end you both have some pawns and you race to try to get your pawns across the board. And when you get a pawn across the board, you call that promotion, and usually you want a queen. So it's white to move here, and white is ready to queen or promote his pawn. He's going to move it up to g8. Then he gets to pick which piece he wants, and he will select a queen, the most powerful piece. Okay, well, what should black do about it? Well, black has a pawn. Maybe he races to try to promote his. Well, not so fast. The queen comes along this diagonal and just captures it. And now we can checkmate. Well, let's say black is a little more stubborn and decides not to immediately lose that pawn. Instead, let's say black brings their king over here. Well, what should you do in this case? Well, there are a lot of winning moves here. White is easily winning this, but here's my suggestion. You want to bring the queen here in front of this pawn. You want to get in front of this pawn. You want that pawn to have no chance at ever promoting. You don't want that pawn ever to get up here. So if you can get your queen in front of that pawn and stop the path of that pawn, that's what you want to do. So here you're checking the king, and the king has only one square it can run to, which is back here. Well, now come up here. Get right in front of the pawn. Now the pawn can never move. Now you're never afraid of that pawn promoting. Your queen is stopping it from even moving. Well, let's say the king moves over here. Well, your queen is in a good spot, so let's bring the king closer. Let's say the king goes over here. Again, your queen is in a good spot, so let's bring the king up the board. Now let's say the king goes over here. Now the queen again is in a good spot, so let's get the king closer. Okay, that forces the king here. It's the only move. Now you can take the pawn, and should you take it with the king? Well, you could, but that lets the black king off of the edge of the board. If you take it with the queen, then the queen is building this nice wall, and the black king is already trapped on the left edge of the board. And then maybe the king has to go there. Well, it does, and the white king goes up towards it, and then maybe it goes there in the corner, or it can come back here. If it goes in the corner, you get a nice close checkmate like that. And that's a checkmate. Okay. Now maybe the black king doesn't stay on the left edge of the board in a position like this, and maybe the king just goes up here towards the center of the board. Well, then you can just capture the pawn. Capture the pawn as soon as it's safe to do so. You capture that pawn. But you want to get in front of your opponent's pawns and stop them from even moving. You don't want them to have any hope. Let's look at one last position with a pawn on the board. So it's white to move, and he can checkmate black in just 4 moves. Let's see how. White's moving up the board and would like to promote the pawn on the g8 square. Should he do it now and get a queen? Check? No, that's silly. You just get your queen captured, and then that's a dead draw. That's a dead position. Nobody has material to mate, to checkmate. So instead, you should bring your king up here to guard that square, so you're helping the pawn promote. Okay, it's black's move. Where can he move? Well, all of these squares are covered by the king, and that square is covered by the pawn, so the king is forced down there to h6. Well, now's a good time to promote. It's safe to do so now. And that queen is already building a nice wall, keeping the black king on the right edge. So let's say the king runs down here. Well, now there's a very tricky way to finish the game in just 2 moves. You don't need to see the tricky way to do it. You can do it in a longer route. If you want to take a longer route to victory, that's fine. But there's a really nice way to checkmate him. If you start running after him with the king, then he's just going to run away. And by the way, you can't get a close mate. That's not good enough there because the king runs away. And of course, that's not good enough because your queen gets captured. So this king could keep pursuing like this, but there's a better way to do it. Okay, so after promoting, the king comes down here. Here's the move. Bring the queen down to g3, keeping the wall, keeping the black king on the right edge of the board, but that forces the king back up towards your king. You're saying, hey, go back towards where my king is. Instead of having your king chase him down, you're saying, no, I'm using my queen to push you back towards my king. Now you get your close mate. There it is. There's checkmate. Okay, and just to show you there's the longer way to do it, you could run after him, and you can run down, and you can run after him, and he runs down, and you continue pursuing, and eventually he runs out of squares. He goes back up, and then you can get your close mate. Or you can even do one of those mates we talked about earlier from far away. That's a checkmate too. Got that little mini wall. All right, so now I hope you are comfortable in the power of your queen and you could use it to checkmate your opponent. Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you for the next one.